Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. Welcome to Africa News. Let's see the top stories for the hour. Kenyan President William Ruto and French President Emmanuel Macron have opened the Africa-France summit in Nairobi. The United Nations says that Somalia is facing a worsening humanitarian crisis. And a UN meeting in Addis Ababa discussed Africa's economic challenges. Kenyan President William Ruto and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron have opened the Africa-France summit in Nairobi on Monday. It brings together around 30 heads of state in a high-level diplomatic gathering. The 2 days of talks will focus on trade, investment and development. It is also the first time the summit is being held in an English-speaking African country, a symbolic move to broaden France's engagement beyond its traditional francophone sphere. The meeting aims to reset ties towards a more equal partnership with a focus on infrastructure, climate action and economic cooperation. Ahead of the summit, France and Kenya signed 11 agreements. They covered nuclear energy, modernised transport and sustainable agriculture. The United Nations and aid agencies are warning that Somalia is sliding deeper into a humanitarian crisis as drought, rising prices and funding shortages leave millions facing severe hunger. Officials say children are among the hardest hit, with nearly 2 million now at risk of malnutrition.
Across parts of Somalia, dry land, dead livestock and overcrowded displacement camps are becoming increasingly common after years of insufficient rainfall. During a visit to the country, the UN humanitarian coordinator for Somalia, George Conway, warned that around 6.5 million people are expected to face severe food insecurity, while nearly 2 million children are at risk of malnutrition.
What we're seeing across the entire country is a malnutrition crisis. We simply don't have the resources to respond as we should do. This is made absolutely worse because of the Middle East crisis, which is raising prices across the whole country, fuel by 150%, even food commodities by at least 20 or 30%.
Aid agencies say 3 consecutive failed rainy seasons have devastated livelihoods, especially in regions dependent on livestock. Families displaced by drought described losing animals, homes and income as conditions continue to worsen.
Even when a little rain fell before, it did not last. That small amount is now gone, and if rain does not come soon, people may start dying, just like the livestock. People depended on livestock, and now the livestock are gone. Everything has been lost.
The World Food Programme says nearly 5 million people have already been affected by the crisis, with more than 200,000 displaced this year alone, most because of drought. Officials say the humanitarian response is also being strained by rising global costs linked to conflict in the Middle East, pushing up fuel and food prices across the country. Aid deliveries continue through supply routes, including the port of Berbera, where thousands of tons of food assistance are being received for Somalia and neighbouring Ethiopia.
A high-level UN meeting in Ethiopia has focused on how African economies can build resilience as global uncertainty continues to disrupt trade, investment and development.
African economies are under pressure from a more fragmented global environment. At a UN meeting in Addis Ababa, officials warned that geopolitical tensions, debt pressures and supply chain disruptions are slowing progress toward development goals.
These local challenges are unfolding against a complex global backdrop marked by geopolitical tensions, conflicts, and economic fragmentation. This discord is disrupting trade, investment, and international cooperation, significantly containing the policy space and weakening collective actions.
Experts say Africa needs deeper trade links and more investment to build resilience.
Africa, it's two things. It's trade, it's investment. And then creating conditions for that to happen is what we are working on.
They also point to critical minerals as an opportunity for green industrialization, if countries can build stronger regional value chains instead of relying mainly on raw material exports.
We need to work together. We need to build up regional value chains in the critical mineral space so that we can use that also as an opportunity for green industrialization.
The meeting's message was that Africa's long-term resilience will depend on stronger cooperation across the continent.
Ethiopia is accelerating efforts to position itself as a manufacturing hub in Africa, with officials pointing to growing industrial output and rising investor interest. A flagship trade and industry expo titled Made in Ethiopia is helping drive rapid growth across the country's manufacturing sector.
Launched 4 years ago, the annual Made in Ethiopia Expo has become a major driver of local manufacturing, creating stronger market linkages between producers and consumers.
This is the fourth time we participate in Made in Ethiopia. In Amharic we call it Ethiopian Tamret. We come here to show our products. Mainly our company is engaged in agricultural implements. This kind of exhibition brings a lot of opportunities to the manufacturer. Especially engaged in manufacturing, not only assembly. You can get a lot of customers that doesn't know Ethiopia can manufacture products like this.
The exhibition has been great. We welcomed a large number of visitors, many of whom had no idea that products like these could be manufactured locally, and they were highly impressed. Those in the health sector were particularly encouraged to see that this medical equipment can be produced domestically, and many pledged to buy from us. So we've built a strong market link and, most importantly, raised significant awareness about our work.
For customers, the expo provides an opportunity to purchase machinery using local currency, while also benefiting from easier and more accessible maintenance services.
Every stuff here, what we have been seeing here is produced in Ethiopia. That is really very amazing. This is a very small machinery which we intended to plant in Addis to have a coffee roasting process. And we already paid in advance to have this machinery. We can easily fix it if we have problem with the machine. It has many benefits. Also, we don't have dollar or foreign currencies to buy from abroad. Now we can buy in Ethiopian birr.
The Made in Ethiopia Expo has helped revitalize the country's manufacturing sector, with export earnings from manufacturing rising from $358 million to $434 million since the initiative began. The domestic market share of locally manufactured goods grew from 30% to 46% within the same period, helping the country save over $14.5 billion through import substitution.
The import substitution is one of the most strategic. We identified 96 different items to substitute in Ethiopia. We saved only the last 9 months $4.85 billion US. And this will help us as a country to balance the trade, because we used to import more than 17 to 18 billion US dollars. Now if we substitute already for $4.85 billion, then we'll continue to be self-sufficient, and we cannot be sovereign country depending on another country's products.
Beyond its economic impact, the Made in Ethiopia Expo is showcasing Ethiopia's growing manufacturing capability and increasingly becoming a symbol of national pride in locally made products. Beka Toma, CGTN, Addis Ababa.
The impact the closure of the Strait of Hormuz due to the war in Iran is putting financial strain on South Africa. Researchers are now testing electric taxis designed specifically for markets in Africa.
Researchers at South Africa's Stellenbosch University are working on a long-term solution to the country's dependence on oil imports. With most of the country's oil supply coming from abroad, South Africa remains vulnerable to global supply shocks.
So in the South African context, we can decarbonize our electrical system quite easily. And then if we can continue with that and e-mobility, then of course we can make a significant contribution towards reduction of CO2 emissions in the world.
One of the university's projects involves converting minibus taxis and other vehicles to run on electricity generated from South Africa's solar energy. Millions of people rely on minibus taxis for their daily commutes, while rising fuel prices continue to put pressure on both operators and passengers.
We're expecting a whole revolution of electric mobility, and what we do at this lab at Stellenbosch University, the Electric Mobility Lab, is to try to prepare for that. Everybody's aware of the petrol and diesel and oil price at the moment just because of the massive increases we've seen. If we can convert to electric mobility, we're actually going to generate our own electrons with our own solar energy.
The lab's converted electric taxi has already completed more than 5,000 kilometres of testing. The team has also applied the same concept to a personal vehicle, converting a VW Beetle to run entirely on electric power. The project comes at a time of global oil instability, with South Africa's taxi industry potentially becoming an important testing ground for electric mobility across Africa.
Africa's film industry took centre stage in Lagos as actors, filmmakers and producers gathered for the 12th edition of the Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards, celebrating achievements in cinema and television across the continent.
Africa's film industry was in focus in Lagos as actors, filmmakers and producers gathered for the 12th edition of the Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards, recognising achievements across film and television. Awards were presented in 32 categories, covering acting, directing and technical production, with some of the continent's biggest stars attending the ceremony. Nigerian actor Uzo Arukwe won Best Actor in a Leading Role for Colours of Fire.
We started on a very small scale, but today you take a flight from Washington, D.C., you can watch all Nigerian movie for the next 12 hours, 13 hours. And there will be good movies that will teach you lessons and show you that there's been an upgrade in our innovations, technology, and so on. So kudos to Africa, kudos to everybody who has engineered this process.
While Linda Ejiofor received the award for Best Actress in a Leading Role for The Serpent's Gift. Cameroon also secured its first AMVCA win in the Best Indigenous Film category for Central Africa, with director Kang Quintus's film Mabanda. Organisers said this year's nominations reflected wider participation from across the continent, as African productions continue expanding their global audience.
AMVCA is always a defining moment. We keep saying it's a full circle moment and we're celebrating the craft. There's so much energy. But for this year, what is so special is we're taking bolder stories, right? We're going with more nominations, and we see a lot of nominations across Africa. So we keep saying AMVC is not about Nigeria, it's about Africa. With the nominations across Africa, it gives us the skill. We do want to take African story to the globe. And the way we can do that is more nominations coming through from the different countries in Africa so that we can authentically tell African story in a confident way.
Industry executives said production quality and international visibility for African-made content have continued to grow in recent years.
African content is improving year after year. If you think about it, it has been the case in Turkey, it has been the case in Korea, in Brazil, in some part of Europe. You know, it takes some time to be uplifting. What I hope is like we can see that the level of production now is allowing African content to be told to the world.
The ceremony also honoured veteran figures in the industry and featured a red carpet event attended by actors, filmmakers and media personalities from across Africa.
And that's all we have today on Africa News. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for continued coverage. Öyle olmadı mı?
Africa's film industry was in focus in Lagos as actors, filmmakers and producers gathered for the 12th edition of the Africa.
And that's all we have today on Africa News. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for continuing coverage.